If we were to grab a Greek dictionary and some Bible commentaries, we discover that in this context, the Greek word perfect isn't determined by behavior. Christ isn't telling us that we have to be perfect humans. That's impossible. He's using the word perfect to describe being whole with our Heavenly Father. God wants to perfect your heart. He wants to make you complete. A few months ago, my pastor, Stephen Furtick, was teaching a sermon. And he said this quote, which stuck to me. My joy is not determined by what happens to me, but what Christ is doing in me and through me. I'm going to say that again. My joy is not determined by what happens to me, but by what Christ is doing in me and through me. Girls, I want to change that a little bit. Your completion, or who you are, is not determined by what happens to you, or by what somebody else thinks of you, or whether or not you get that college scholarship that you want, or whether or not you make the cheerleading squad. Your completion is determined by what Christ has done for you and what he wants to do in you. So not only does he want you, not only does he pursue you, and not only does he complete you, but he wants to be your all in all. He wants to be your everything. Now, there's one person who doesn't want you to get that. His name is Satan. And the reason he doesn't want you to get that is because once he knows that once you get that we become incredibly confident and powerful women. And that it is then that we have what it takes to truly impact those people who are around us. And he doesn't want that to happen. I have an issue with losing things. Does anybody else in this room have an issue with losing things? Good. I hate to tell you, but chances are you're not going to outgrow it. So I told you about last month that I went up to Maine with my daughter. And one night after dinner, we decided that we were going to head up to Cadillac Mountain, which is the highest eastern seaboard point. So we hop in our car and we head up there and I'm like, hey, I got to go to the bathroom. Girls always have to go to the bathroom. So I had to go to the bathroom before we went hiking, and we went hiking and then we went back to our bed and breakfast. And then I saw that blinking on my cell phone. So I went over and I picked up my cell phone and there was a message. Lynn, I'm from the South, okay? Lynn, this is Mary from State Farm. And I just got this call that they found your wallet in the bathroom at Acadia National Park. I'm like, oh my gosh, how was I going to fly home? That was my driver's license, all my cash, and my visa. Don't tell my husband I did this. So I buzz up to the mountain and I grab my wallet and I'm like, you are so dingy. How about those remotes to your cars? I no longer have one. Because at $80 a pop, I'm not allowed to keep buying them anymore. Or how about sunglasses? Do you know what? I always tell this story. I lost my sunglasses on the airplane today. I'm not even joking. I did it. But you know where my sunglasses are most of the time? They're on top of my head. There is a point to this story. Who you are in the completion that he has for you, it's already inside of you. But just like those sunglasses that are so often on top of my head, we don't remember that we are already completed by Jesus. And we need to remember that. And we need to get that deep inside our hearts. Now, there's a couple of ways that we can do this, okay? So this is where you got to know, if you've been drifting from me, come back. Good, I'm glad I have your attention. Okay, so here's the two things that I want you to do. Number one, remember we talked about what a guy does when he's trying to get a girl's attention. They spend lots of time together. I have a son who's going to be 19 in 2 weeks. And one time his girlfriend spent 3 hours watching him install his car stereo. Girls don't make that kind of investment. But she was crazy about Zachary, so she was willing to do that. So if you want a wow relationship with Jesus, it doesn't just happen. You are going to have to invest in it. Okay? So the way that you do that is just like Lisa. You start by reading his love letters to you. Now, if you say to me, when am I supposed to do that? Well, the great thing is this conference is at the beginning of summer. And so each one of you have a lot of time to begin starting these dates with Jesus. So I want you, before Monday, before this weekend ends, I want you to look at your schedule, and I want you to determine where you can invest in your relationship with Jesus, when you can have a date with him. Now, if you were to say, I have no idea what that looks like, I can help you. The first way is that the ministry that I'm a part of, Proverbs 31, we have a division just for teens called Radical Revolution. And we write devotions that we can send straight to your Facebook. And you know, it doesn't get any easier than that. So if you'll stop by our table, or for those of you who've already had your colors done by Sherry, if you flip that card over, on the other side, there's a place where you can check. And I'm the one who puts those in the computer. So please write legibly. But I will make sure that you start getting devotions straight into your Facebook or to your email address. Okay? The second thing that I want you to do is I want you to begin to replace the negative thoughts that you already have in your head. Do any of you have issues in here with negative thoughts about yourself? You know, sometimes it's if only I was prettier, if only I was thinner, if only I was smarter, if only I was more athletic, if only I didn't lose my sunglasses. I bet you the majority of you in here have an MP3 player. And I bet the majority of you in here have at least one song on there that shouldn't be on there. Now, if you wanted to get rid of that song, what would you have to do? Could you just look at that song on your MP3 and say, oh, that shouldn't be there? No, it wouldn't go away just by thinking it shouldn't be there. You need to plug your iPod into your computer, pull up your library, and take it off, right? And hopefully you would put something good back on it. Well, your mind is a lot like your iPod. The negative thoughts that you have about yourself, they're not going to go away. You are going to have to be intentional about stopping them. And the best way to do that is by replacing them with good thoughts. So here's where I'm going to help you again. If you will come back to my table, I have made a list of my favorite verses, and I've already put them on a card for you. So I want you to stop by the table, and I want you to pick up that card. And then from now until 4th of July, when you're having your dates with Jesus, I want you to read these verses. And you will find that as you read these over and over and over again, eventually you will memorize them. And they will become a part of who you are. Okay, so you got those two things? You're going to have a date with Jesus, and I want you to do that until 4th of July. And then I want you to read these verses until 4th of July. See, it's a lot easier to make a commitment when you know that there's, a certain time period. Now, sometimes when we are in these situations, again, we have to be intentional. This relationship with Jesus, having a great relationship with him, doesn't just happen. Remember my story I started at the beginning of the story about me and that guy? Well, right after I got out of high school, I told you I went to Bible school. And while I was at Bible school, my leaders encouraged me to really set aside that time in my life to focus on my relationship with Jesus. And so I made a commitment that for a year that I wouldn't do any dating. and that I would take that entire year to just focus on investing with him. Well, who do you guess wants to call me while I'm 1,000 miles from home? That Greg boy. It had only been 7 years. I couldn't believe it. Of course, I was ecstatic. I was freaking out. I'm like, yeah, he finally called me. Not only am I older than 16, I'm old enough to get married. And I was pumped. So I ran to my counselor and I'm like, guess what? This guy that I've had a crush on for 7 years has finally called me, and he's flying 1,000 miles down to Dallas to see me. And she's like, have you forgotten something? And as soon as she said that, I thought, you got to be kidding me. She's like, Lynn, you cannot focus on 2 relationships with all of your heart at the same time. And I knew that what she was saying was true, but come on, this isn't just any old guy, this is Greg. And I began to wonder, well, God, can I trust you? I mean, I didn't have that kind of history with God. I'd never really known if I could trust him or not, and this was no small matter. This is a major deal. But I decided that I would. And I remember that the night Greg called me, I remember taking the phone and hiding in the closet because I thought, I don't know if I can tell him to not come. I just don't know if I have that kind of guts to do that. But I did. And I told him, you know what? I can't be involved in a relationship right now. I'm working on my relationship with Jesus, and I just can't go there. So don't call me, don't write me, just don't have any contact with me. And it was the hardest thing I'd ever done in my life. And then I finished school, and I went home to visit my parents before I moved on with life. And I went to go to church, and guess who was there? Greg. And Greg asked me out. And this time I knew that the answer was yes. And 11 months later, I became Mrs. Gregory Cowell. Now, ladies, the really cool thing about this story is the day that I became Mrs. Gregory Cowell, it was the first time I was ever with a man. I got married as a virgin. And the reason why I was able to do that was because I had already found my first love. You see, in life, ladies, Jesus is the cake. Jesus is the substance that this life is about. And all of those other things in life, those great things, like whether it be a guy or whether it be an education or a career or fashion or whatever else you're into, those things are the icing on the cake, but they are not meant to be the cake. Have you ever gone to a wedding and gotten in line for the cake, and when you got up to the front, the lady took a knife and she scraped off the icing and threw it on a plate and handed it to you? No, you'd think she was psychotic. But girls, that's what we try to do in life sometimes, is we try to have all of the good stuff. But the good stuff really isn't that good if Jesus isn't your everything. Now, you can imagine after being flipped out about this guy for a really long time, you know, I really love my husband a lot. Next month, it'll be 23 years that we've been married. But ladies, you know what? The day he asked me to marry me, do you know what I said to him? I said, if you can be comfortable being number 2 for the rest of our lives together, then my answer is yes. But if you can't, because Jesus will always be number 1, I just don't think it'll work. And he was comfortable, and we're doing great. But I want you for 1 minute, I want you to think about, what would your church look like? What would your school look like? What would your community look like if every girl in this room got that? If every girl in this room no longer looked to that guy to fill that place in her heart, if every girl in this room no longer felt like she had to make that cheerleading squad or she had to get on the honor roll in order to feel great about herself, girls, I'm telling you, we'd change our world if we got that he was that into you.